Have you ever carried a secret so heavy it burned through your silence? Imagine standing face to face with a ghost from a war you were told to forget, their eyes holding a truth the world tried to erase. That's the moment Jonas McBride felt his heart stop in a small-town diner, staring at a waitress whose scarred arm bore a mark he buried years ago, a mark of a unit that never existed, except in the nightmares of those who survived it. Marisol Rivera pours coffee with steady hands, but beneath her quiet lies a fire that could unravel a conspiracy deeper than war itself. Step into her story, where silence isn't surrender, it's a weapon waiting to strike. Jonas McBride had seen death before, had watched it up close, had cradled it in his arms in the scorched dirt of Kandahar, but nothing prepared him for this, for seeing it pour him coffee. It happened the moment she leaned in, steady hands balancing a pot of steaming brew, a small smile tugging at her lips. Her forearm caught the light, tanned, scarred, but unmistakably marked. Jonas's breath hitched, his pulse stilled. It wasn't just some old ink. It wasn't just a tattoo. It was the tattoo EV09. 9 times, a unit designation that had no home in official files, no ceremony in remembrance, no gravestone in Arlington. Because Echo Viper 9 had never existed. Not on paper, not anymore. But Jonas had served in it, fought in it, watched it die. And now one of them was standing in front of him with a name tag that read Marisol and a coffee pot like any small-town waitress. Except she wasn't just anyone. She was the medic. The medic. The one they thought was gone. Consumed in fire, written off as collateral damage, reduced to silence. Except she survived. And now she endured. In this fluorescent-lit diner, among vinyl booths and chrome counters, she bore the weight of more than orders. She carried the truth, the one they buried with the unit, the one Jonas had never stopped bleeding for. The sound of the bell over the door had barely faded when Jonas crossed the threshold of Rosie's diner. His boots struck the old tile floor with a heaviness born not just of age but memory. The smell of grease, bacon, burnt coffee, it flooded him. A wave of the past. Nothing here had changed. Time seemed politely locked out. Sunshine filtered through the bent blinds and cast golden bars across the black and white checkered floor, like some halfway world between past and present. Jonas took his usual spot without thinking. Third booth from the end, right under the window. How long had it been? A year? Maybe more. He told himself it was the road that called him back, or the weather, or even the bacon. But deep down, he knew the real reason. The ghosts were getting too loud again. He let out a long breath, fingers numbly working the zipper of his leather jacket. Beneath it, stitched onto his denim vest, lay a crimson viper coiled tight around a combat blade. Faded, but intact. No one here would know what it meant. No one ever did, because Echo Viper 9 had been designed to disappear. He absently rubbed the burn scars that still twisted across his forearm, scars that had once sat beneath his own EV09 tattoo. It had been scorched away in the Kandahar fire, along with everything else. "Coffee, sir?" The voice jolted him from thought. He looked up and froze. The waitress stood with a practiced calm, notebook in one hand, coffee in the other. Late 20s, hair tied back in a bun that didn't care for vanity. Her frame was wiry, efficient, a medic's body, still built to endure. But it wasn't her stance or even her voice that held him still. It was the tattoo. As she leaned forward to pour, her sleeve shifted. The light hit it just right. Jonas's eyes locked onto the inside of her right forearm. 9 bold, blocky letters, EV09. Military font, black ink, crisp. His pulse stumbled. He blinked, but the mark stayed. He'd seen that exact lettering before. Not in a catalog, not in a file, in blood, in dirt, in smoke-choked tunnels when everything collapsed around them and the only sound was screaming. "No," he murmured. The name tag said Marisol. She paused. "You okay, sir?" Jonas couldn't answer. He wasn't here anymore. He was back there. The cup hit the saucer and the clang snapped him halfway into the present. But he couldn't look away from her arm. "Sir?" Her voice carried something new now, gentle concern. Her eyes moved from the untouched cup to his face. "Do you need anything else?" His mouth opened, but no words followed. His gaze hadn't shifted. That tattoo, EV09, it wasn't old. It wasn't sun-faded or battle-worn. It was fresh, sharp, clean, as if she had chosen to carry it now. Not as memory, but defiance. Had she earned it again? Jonas's hands trembled beneath the table. He clenched them into fists, ashamed. That mark wasn't supposed to exist anymore. It should have died. With the unit, with them, with her. She shouldn't be alive, he muttered. I'm sorry. Marisol's brow furrowed, but he finally lifted his gaze to meet hers. Her eyes, dark brown, focused, calm, met his without flinching. But there was a shift, a flicker of something that wasn't fear but memory. Recognition, maybe. I knew that code, Jonas rasped. His voice was dry, brittle. Where did you get it? Marisol tensed. Just a fraction. Barely enough to notice, but he saw it. Her fingers tugged instinctively at her sleeve. It's personal, she said quietly. Old family thing. Jonas narrowed his eyes. No, that doesn't track. That code, Echo Viper 9, it was erased, scrubbed. Not even we were supposed to remember. She didn't answer, but the silence said more than words. Answer me. His voice cracked, not from rage, from something deeper, fragile, tired. People were starting to look. A woman at the corner booth paused with her fork midair. The man at the counter, old biker, judging by the worn patches on his vest, leaned back, sensing the temperature shift. Marisol gently returned the coffee pot to her tray. Maybe you've had a long day, sir. But Jonas stood, slowly, stiffly, his knees groaned like an old machine forced back to life. I carried one of your team out in my arms, he said, and now his eyes were locked to hers like he could dig through the years, the silence, the soot. I saw that mark on a patch soaked in his blood. She didn't flinch. But her eyes, something flickered, and that was enough. I buried that insignia, Jonas said, voice cracking again. I watched every casket go up in smoke. I saluted them all. Eve Hero 9 was supposed to be something like we were ghosts. Marisol could have walked away then, could have played it off like a bad coincidence, like a tattoo she didn't understand. But she didn't. She stepped forward, quiet, measured. Who was the one you carried? Jonas swallowed hard. She wasn't a stranger anymore. She was something suspended between pain and miracle. Corporal Avery, 19. Marisol's breath caught, her lips parted. She blinked once, slowly. He was my brother. The diner went silent. Even the hum of the ancient fridge seemed to dim. The walls themselves seemed to lean in. Jonas stepped back, as if hit. That's impossible. Your family was listed KIA, she finished softly. That's what they wrote. That's what command wanted. They left us, Jonas whispered. And then he sank back into the booth, legs refusing to hold the weight of the truth, of the past. Marisol moved without hesitation. She knelt beside him, a glass of water in her hand. Breathe, she whispered. I saw the fire, Jonas said hoarsely. We thought there were no survivors. There weren't supposed to be. Not all of us, she said, voice hushed, almost swallowed by the thick diner air. But the truth in her words cracked like ice across the floor. Echo Viper didn't die. Not completely. Across the room, forks froze midair. Even the ever-present sizzle of the griddle seemed to retreat, fading into a backdrop of held breaths. Jonas stared at her like he was watching a ghost slip back into its skin. You're not on any lists, he muttered, his voice thinned by disbelief, eyes locked onto hers as though trying to confirm that she was flesh and not some cruel hallucination. They erased you. Marisol dipped her chin in a quiet nod. And I let them. Jonas's gaze dropped to her forearm. The tattoo was fresh and deliberate, stark black ink etched with unwavering purpose. EV09. You wore the mark, he said slowly, almost reverently, not for remembrance, as a warning. She didn't flinch, didn't argue. She didn't need to. Jonas exhaled, the weight of 5 years pressing from his lungs, then leaned in, elbows on the chipped linoleum table. His voice lowered, urgent. Why now? Why show it? Her eyes swept the diner like sonar, cataloging faces, exits, threats. Then they found him again, steadied on his. Because someone's trying to bring Echo Viper back from the ashes, she said, calm as steel drawn quiet. And this time they're not leaving any of us behind. That night, sleep never touched Jonas McBride. He returned to the cheap motel just 2 blocks south of Rosie's diner. Room 12, the one with the broken fan that clattered like distant rotor blades, and floral wallpaper that curled at the edges like a scorched map. The bed may as well have been a concrete slab. He lay flat on his back, boots still laced, eyes open to the cracked ceiling above him, half expecting it to blink back. She's alive. They lied. They buried her, buried all of them. And now she's walking around pouring refills like the war never touched her. But it had. God, it had. Jonas saw it now, not just in the ink, but in the way her body moved, measured, watchful. Always counting, steps, angles, threats. That wasn't waitress reflex. That was survival. That was field conditioning, burned into bone and muscle memory. That kind of awareness doesn't fade. You don't forget how to move like prey. By 3:47 a.m., he gave up pretending. He rolled to the side and reached beneath the nightstand, dragging out the old military-issue duffel he never fully unpacked. From it, he pulled a worn folder, the front stamped crudely with a hand-sketched emblem, a crimson viper coiled around a combat blade. He laid it on the bed and opened it like a priest unlocking scripture. Inside, scraps, fragments, ghosts, yellowed news clippings, redacted documents, names that no longer existed in any system. Faint whispers and blurry rumors scavenged over 5 long years. Every time someone told him Echo Viper 9 was a myth, a glitch in records, a thing best left alone, he wrote it down. Every denial, every omission, every nervous glance at the mention of Kandahar. He gathered it like sacred ash. Echo Viper 9, scrubbed from military archives after 2014. Officially a classified munitions mishap during exfil. Unofficially, too dangerous to keep breathing, too messy to admit, easier to burn the file than face the truth. And Marisol Rivera? She had never surfaced. No casualty report, no evac log, no alias, no whispers. A name never spoken, until today, until she spoke to him. He'd looked into her eyes and seen it, the exact same fire he'd glimpsed in every man and woman who crawled through the firestorm and returned with pieces missing. That look that said, I survived, but it cost me everything. Jonas had seen Echo Viper again, not just the patch, but the ghost behind it. He closed the folder and stood, stretching until his shoulders popped. Outside, the sky was beginning to pale. The town stirred with small, indifferent noises. A milk truck groaned past the motel, a lone dog barked at phantoms, and the sun bled faint gold through dusty blinds. Jonas grabbed his weather jacket, checked the sidearm inside the inner pocket, not out of fear, but muscle memory. Habit. Then he stepped outside, breath fogging in the crisp air. He needed to see her again, not just for closure, but because if Marisol had made it out, others might have too. And if others lived, the truth was still alive. That meant the cover-up hadn't buried the mission deep enough. The dead still had voices. Some of them were whispering now. Above the laundromat, Marisol Rivera stirred before dawn. The apartment was more bunker than home. Single room, one window, no frills. Clean, contained, and most importantly, overlooked both alley exits. She never slept anywhere she couldn't map blindfolded. She moved through her morning with surgical precision. Boil water, 3 slow breaths, check the deadbolt, then the second lock she'd installed herself. Beneath the floorboards, a steel box. Inside, a thumb drive containing her fallback ID. Every morning, her fingers brushed it. A silent ritual, a tether, just in case. Then she rolled up her sleeve and studied the ink again. EVA 9, her only relic from that other life. The scars around it had softened, but the mark itself remained dark, deliberate, etched not on her skin, but into her marrow. Some mornings it ached. Other days it felt like armor. Echo Viper had never been noble. They were fast, dirty, unsanctioned. But they had been hers, and they'd been abandoned. She pulled down her sleeve, tied on her apron. At Rosie's, Marisol wore her role like Kevlar. pleasant, quiet, always just busy enough to avoid conversation. Not rude, but never warm. To the locals, she was a mystery wrapped in good manners. Some thought she was shy. Others guessed she had a kid at home. One man even half joked she was in witness protection. None of them were entirely wrong. What no one knew, what no one could know, was that Rosie's wasn't just a workplace. It was her perch, her tower, her perimeter. Every night after the others had gone home and the cook had locked up, Marisol took 15 minutes under the guise of restocking. What she actually did was check the footage, not from the rusty old wall cam, but from a micro camera she'd hidden inside the air vent above booth 3. It was always booth 3, the window booth, the one Jonas had chosen. Coincidence? She didn't believe in coincidence, she believed in habits, in surveillance, in contingency. So when she reviewed the previous day's feed, paused on the exact moment Jonas McBride caught sight of her tattoo, when she saw the blood drain from his face and recognition settle like a blow to the chest, she didn't panic. She zoomed in, studied his expression, and whispered with a breath like iron, "Finally." At precisely 8:17 a.m., Victor Grange swaggered into Rosie's diner, Thursday routine as predictable as a metronome. Clad in a spotless golf shirt stretched tight across sculpted arms, smile like a discount movie star, and that trademark pair of aviators perched like arrogance above his eyes. Behind him, his entourage, Donnie and Chase. Local boys, spine optional, loyalty negotiable. They slid into their usual booth, second from the back. Victor stretched theatrically, grinning like he owned the deed to the building. "Morning, sunshine," he called out as Marisol passed with a tray in her hands. She didn't even blink. But Jonas, 3 booths away, tensed. He knew that voice. The same smarmy drawl contractors used when they'd never seen a firefight, but still strutted through war zones wrapped in body armor. Men who thought cruelty passed for charm. Victor leaned back, his eyes never leaving Marisol. "You know," he said louder, angling his voice to catch the nearby booths, "I read that trauma survivors really shouldn't work service jobs. Might get triggered, poor things." Laughter erupted from his booth like a cheap sitcom track. Marisol kept walking. Victor wasn't done. He pulled out his phone, thumbing the screen as the camera lens caught the light. "Oh, don't mind me. Maybe if she smiles, the lens will crack." More laughter followed. Victor's voice, smug and sharp, sliced through the hush of morning fatigue inside Rosie's diner. Jonas McBride laid his fork down quietly. The eggs on his plate were stone cold now, rubbery around the edges. He didn't even notice until the clang of the utensil brought him back. His eyes went to Marisol. No, not just looked. He watched her. There was a quiet strain in her shoulders, a subtle but telling shift of the tray to her left hand. Not because it was heavy, not to balance it. She was freeing her right hand. Reflex, not the reflex of a waitress, but of a soldier. Combat instinct, not customer service training. That shift meant something. Jonas rose slowly, not to step in yet, but to observe. Something old and sharp stirred under his ribs. Victor had turned his phone toward Marisol again, hunting for humiliation. He was trying to capture a clip for one of those crass little channels, compilations of servers stumbling, spilling, snapping. Jonas had heard of people like him. Parasites, making money mocking others, one edit at a time. "Come on, Marisol," Victor goaded. "Give me that war face, snarl a little." That was when she stopped. Marisol turned her head, just slightly, and met Victor's eyes. Not for long, not theatrical, but it was enough. The kind of look that didn't need volume or violence, enough to freeze the air between them, to interrupt his smirk for half a heartbeat. Then she walked away. Victor laughed again, but the sound had changed, hollow now, staged. Jonas slid back into his seat, though his whole body was still tight with tension. He hadn't moved, hadn't intervened, but now something inside him had locked into place. He knew without doubt what he'd suspected since the moment he walked in. Marisol Rivera wasn't just surviving. She was waiting. And the next time Victor stepped too far over the line, she wouldn't walk away. The bell above the diner's door gave a final jingle as the last customer shuffled out. It was close to 3 p.m., and outside the sun had begun its slow descent, stretching long shadows across the parking lot. Inside, Rosie's had gone quiet. Too quiet. Marisol flipped the sign to closed and slipped into the back hallway, her apron already folded tight in her hand. She passed the mop closet, the freezer humming low behind its sealed door, and climbed the narrow stairwell that led to the staff storage room. Only it wasn't just storage anymore. She reached the top landing and unlocked a padlock with a practiced four-digit code, the same muscle memory she once used to key radios in recon teams. She pushed open the door. The room was cramped, shelves stacked with paper cups and syrup jugs, napkin towers leaning like monuments to monotony. But tucked against the back wall stood a metal filing cabinet, and just above it, hidden in the ceiling tiles, was a custom surveillance rig. 3 micro cameras, hardwired to a drive no one else knew existed. Marisol crouched, pulled out her laptop, and connected it. She fast-forwarded through the morning feed. Static, chatter, clatter of plates. Then 8:18 a.m. appeared on the corner of the screen. There he was, Victor Grange, mouth moving, phone out, firing off his usual trash. She didn't flinch, watching it. Not anymore. This wasn't memory, it was intel. Surveillance. Something you analyzed, not relived. Then she saw it, frame by frame, Jonas McBride. The way he sat, rigid, alert, when Victor started his taunts. That slight forward lean, the set of his jaw. He hadn't acted, but he had been ready. She stared at his face frozen on the screen. Then closed the laptop. He was still out there. She knew he would be. Marisol descended the stairs and stepped out the back exit. Jonas was there, leaning against the brick wall like he had grown out of it. Arms crossed. The sunlight hit his face in angled gold, deepening the grooves that hadn't been there in the booth that morning. "You waited," she said. He didn't answer immediately, just nodded toward the alleyway. Didn't want to leave without saying something. "Then say it." Jonas paused, then spoke in a voice so low it felt carved from something raw. "You're not just getting by, are you?" Marisol narrowed her eyes, studying him like a riddle. "What do you think I'm doing?" "I think," he exhaled, slow, steady. "You're building something. Gathering. Planning." He wasn't wrong. Marisol stepped closer, not confrontational, but deliberate. She erased the space between fear and alliance. "Tell me, McBride," she said, "are you here to stop me?" He shook his head once. "No. I'm here to help you burn the whole thing down." A beat passed, then another, and for the first time in days, maybe weeks, Marisol allowed herself the faintest, almost imperceptible smile. The dust in Kandahar didn't fall like dust should. It scraped. It clung. It buried itself in every thread of your uniform, every crease of your body, every soft corner of your mind. It wasn't just sand. It was history ground to ash. It filled the cracks in your boots and the seams of your spirit. Marisol tightened the strap on her medical kit and crouched low behind a fractured mud brick wall. Her gaze locked on the skyline. Gunfire echoed 2 blocks away, erratic and sharp, not suppression fire, not coordinated. This was collapse. She pressed her comms. "Bravo 2 status?" "Static," then "North Alley pinned, 2 down, 1 bleeding out." Holt's voice clipped calm but with that edge, that strain that told her time had run out. Minutes, maybe seconds, Marisol ran. She darted through the skeletal alleys of Maru District, past overturned carts and the rotting stink of burnt animals, past broken mannequins half melted in store windows, their faces contorted into ghostly screams. The EV09 patch on her shoulder flapped with each stride, a crimson whisper in the air. Echo Viper 9, no flag, no medevac, no rescue. They were the backup. 2 weeks ago, they dropped in with one objective: neutralize a high-value target embedded with a rogue militia building biosignal jammers, the kind that crippled drone controls. But the op had unraveled from the start. Bad intel, wrong location. The target had vanished. The town was booby-trapped before their boots even hit dirt. Now they were cut off, 6 left, bleeding supplies, bleeding hope. She reached the north alley just as a shockwave punched the wall beside her, blasting shards of stone and dirt into the air. "Contact!" a voice screamed. Marisol dropped beside Holt. His leg was torn open, raw muscle and blood. "You're lucky," she muttered, already digging through her med kit. Couple inches higher and I'd be wasting morphine. Holt managed a grimace. Save it for somebody who ain't already screwed. Behind her, Sergeant Avery, her little brother, was covering their flank, his M4 releasing sharp, controlled bursts. They're flanking left, he called. We gotta move. No, Marisol snapped. Her hands were already winding the tourniquet. You gotta hold. But something shifted. Her senses, honed from too many missions, too many corridors full of wrong turns, screamed all at once. Not quiet, stillness, not a break in noise, but a pause. A calculated silence. She looked up just in time to see it. A drone, black, sleek, unfamiliar, rising like a specter above the rooftops 2 blocks away. Eyes up, she barked. Too late. The explosion wasn't loud. It vibrated, low and primal, ripping through bone before sound caught up. Fire bloomed. Pressure slammed into the alley like a steel fist. The blast didn't just break walls. It emptied the air. The shock wave hurled Holt like a rag doll. Marisol's body hit the ground so hard, her ribs cracked on impact. For one white-hot second, there was no sound, just light. Horrible, hungry, devouring light. Then the ringing started, the kind that hooks into your skull and won't let go. Marisol couldn't move, kept, and this becomes more than just a ghost story. Marisol didn't reply right away. Her fingers held the photo at an angle, the edge trembling only slightly. Almost invisible unless you were looking for it. The picture showed a drone assembly yard, rows of sleek black shells under tarps, tagged with both Ricotech and Zenthus emblems. Her jaw worked, eyes scanning every pixel as if memory could extract more than the lens ever captured. Then slowly, she set it down. You said there's a pattern, so how far does it go? Jonas sat back, folding his hands, voice low. Farther than we thought. There's a whole system buried under the chatter. Contracts rerouted through front companies, ops scrubbed before the first bullet even fired. Names that vanished the same week we burned. It's not just Haynes and Grange. There are others, and they've done this before. Marisol's voice hardened. 2 other units? He nodded. But we're the only ones who left any trace behind. You, me, Maine. Maybe Rios, if she's still alive. What we saw, what we lived through, it wasn't just collateral. It was planned. The air between them thickened. Marisol leaned forward, forearms on the table. Her voice was cold but steady. Then we make them unerase us, loud. Jonas gave a small, bitter smile. Delilah Knox, that's the reporter I told you about. She doesn't scare easy. If we give her the right lead, she can blow this wide open. But it has to come from you. They've tried to make me disappear before. You're the one they never expected to crawl back from Kandahar. She said nothing for a while, just stared at the note, codes that sang like ghosts from comms logs she once memorized while her wounds wept in an abandoned bunker. It wasn't fear in her face or even pain. It was clarity. I still have the drive, she said finally. What's left of it needs decrypting, but most of it's audio fragments, logs, maybe one satellite overlay if the data's not too corrupted. Jonas's hands tightened. We don't need everything, just enough. Enough to make them run. No, she said, not run. I want them to answer. Her tone was final, and in that moment Jonas saw the medic again. The one who'd knelt in fire, who'd crawled out of the grave they'd built for her with raw hands and fury. They made me disappear, she whispered. Now I make them visible. The coffee shop stayed quiet. Outside, a semi rumbled by, loud and low. Marisol slid the envelope into her jacket. Her sleeves remained down, but now the outline of the EV09 ink seemed to burn through fabric. Jonas rose first. He nodded once. I'll keep moving. I'll let Knox know to be ready. When you're ready, drop the signal. I'll come running. She didn't answer, just watched him go, then turned her face toward the window. Her reflection stared back, older, thinner, sharper. A shadow of Sergeant Rivera, but not her. Not anymore. Later that night, alone in her one bedroom over the laundromat, she dug through the false bottom drawer. The drive was still there, so was the old patch, faded, scorched, the crimson viper still coiled over the blade. She didn't cry out. Not now. She didn't need to. She had waited long enough. Echo Viper 9 was no longer buried. It was coming back with teeth. She had gathered all the proof, documents, recordings, photos. All that was left now was to light the fire. We're not aiming for justice yet, Jonas said, voice calm. We just need to make them see. Marisol folded the envelope and tucked it deep inside her jacket, her gaze locked with his. Then let's blind them, she said. 2 days later, Delilah Knox walked into Rosie's diner. She wore a worn Georgia Bulldogs hoodie and a wariness that hung low over her shoulders, though her eyes still cut sharp and clear. She didn't pull out a notebook, didn't bring a camera. She just ordered a black coffee and, without a word, slipped a folded envelope under the sugar dispenser. Marisol picked it up like it was just another order slip, carried it to the kitchen. Inside was a burner phone. It was already on, already connected. No files on it yet. It was waiting. That night, Marisol uploaded everything, audio clips of Victor Grange laughing about ghost units and government erasure. Screen recordings of encrypted chats where he flaunted payments from consulting gigs, photos from her surveillance rig. A time-stamped video, Victor drunk, leaning too close to a date in a bar, bragging about cleaning up loose ends in the desert. 10 minutes after the upload, Delilah's only response came through. Holy hell, this will burn. The trap was set. All that remained was the spark. 3 days later, it arrived on schedule. Victor Grange strolled back into Rosie's diner with his usual air of entitlement. Flashy new watch, booming voice, phone already recording before he even sat down. Jonas was there too, calm, posted near the entrance, hiding behind a newspaper he wasn't reading. Victor's smirk widened when he saw Marisol. Well, look who's still slinging hash browns like she didn't crawl out of a goddamn crater. She didn't flinch. He pushed harder, lifting his phone, trying to provoke. Give me that look again. The whole trauma-turned-martyr vibe. Big crowd pleaser. Jonas rose slowly from his seat. Victor noticed him now. Hey, old man, mind your business. Jonas tilted his head, his voice like gravel rubbed smooth. I would, but I've got a condition. Break out in hives around cowards who brag about combat they've never survived. The diner fell silent, tension thick in the air. Victor's face flushed red. You don't know who I am. I know exactly who you are, Jonas said. And more importantly, so does she. Victor turned to Marisol, lips curling into a sneer. You gonna cry now? She stepped forward, steady, unshaken. No, she said. I'm going to let you finish your coffee. Then I'm going to walk back to the office and hit send. Victor blinked. Send what? Her voice dipped low, just enough to cut. Everything. He stared, jaw tight. She leaned in just enough to make him nervous. You talk a lot, Victor. I just made sure someone was listening. He shot up so fast his chair skidded backward. But Jonas was already between him and the door. He wasn't going anywhere. And the others in the diner, they weren't just watching. They were witnessing. Something had shifted. The woman they'd known as just a waitress, she wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't broken. She was a soldier. And the man mocking her, he was already on fire. Just before dawn, the first video dropped. A clipped audio file. Victor Grange's voice, unmistakable, arrogant, smug. Talking about ghost units, about how some missions were meant to go sideways. The voice played over a still photo of him grinning at a bar. Time-stamped, verified. An hour later, another video surfaced. Blurry security cam footage from Rosie's, Victor laughing while filming Marisol. A subtitle overlaid, they buried her unit. Now he laughs about it. By noon, hashtags were trending. #EVREON was real. #we survived. #silenced. No more. Then came the ignition. Military forums erupted. Veterans began posting patches, scarred, scorched, stitched to leather jackets. Some uploaded old redacted mission briefings. Some showed inked tattoos, coiled crimson vipers, numbers, fire-scorched symbols, all bearing the same mark, EV09. It was like someone had hit a dormant nerve, and now everyone still carrying phantom wounds stood up as one. By sundown, Victor's company, Grange and Hall Consulting, had locked down every one of its social media accounts. By midnight, 3 separate defense contractors had quietly erased all mentions of prior business with them from their websites. And at first light the next morning, Delilah Knox's expose landed on the front pages of 3 major independent military publications. The headline was stark: "The Waitress with the War Tattoo, a soldier the government tried to erase." That night, Jonas found Marisol on the roof of the motel, sitting cross-legged beside the satellite dish. The burner phone lay next to her, screen still lit. She didn't speak when he joined her. Below them, the town slept on, unaware that something massive had taken root in its shadow. "You just started a war," Jonas said quietly. Marisol shrugged. "They started it. I just returned fire." Jonas nodded. "You're not done, though." She looked over at him. "You think I should go louder?" "I think," he said, "it's time you stopped hiding behind coffee mugs and let the world see what Echo Viper trained you to be." Marisol looked out across the horizon. The old scars on her arms shimmered in the moonlight, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel like a ghost haunting someone else's war. She felt visible. She felt real. But Victor Grange wasn't the kind of man to go down easy. Less than 48 hours after the story broke, he reemerged. Not in hiding, no. He walked straight into the media spotlight: morning talk shows, well-lit podcast studios, Zoom interviews with curated bookshelves, and a face rehearsed in righteousness. "They're trying to destroy me," he said, with a wounded tone. "This is a misunderstanding, a joke, taken out of context." He claimed Marisol was a government plant, that the footage was fake, that Echo Viper 9 never existed. He pointed fingers at veterans, accusing them of a coordinated smear campaign meant to undermine national defense and the hard work of good men. It might have worked. It had in the past. Until Staff Sergeant Lucas T. Maine stepped into the frame. Grizzled, weathered, desert tan still clinging to a worn flak jacket. The patch on his chest said everything. EV-09. He didn't raise his voice, didn't dramatize. "I was there," he said plainly. "I saw the drone strike hit. I held what was left of my squad leader in my hands." He paused, eyes steady. "And the woman you're trying to erase, she pulled me out of the flames. When command left us to die, she carried me back." Within hours, others began to surface. One by one, survivors came forward. Some kept their faces blurred. Others stepped into the light. All bore scars, tattoos, burns, metal screws beneath skin. All carried the same quiet defiance. All spoke the same truth. Echo Viper was real, and so is she. Marisol hadn't asked for their help. She hadn't even known many had lived. But truth has a way of surfacing once it breaks the surface, and Jonas had helped it break clean. It couldn't be buried again. By the third day, Victor's legal team issued a threatening press release, talking lawsuits, false veterans, digital impersonation. By day 4, it was gone, quietly pulled. And on the morning of the 5th day, Victor Grange walked into Rosie's diner again. No phone, no cameras, no swagger, just rage and desperation. The bell above the door chimed, but it sounded hollow this time, not like a welcome. Victor stepped into the diner as though he still owned the air in it. He stood in the doorway of Rosie's diner like a man losing his grip on the script he'd written for himself. The arrogance, once worn like a second skin, had peeled away in the glare of exposure. His face was drawn tight, eyes hollowed from too many nights spent wrestling with fallout he could no longer contain. No phone now, no self-assured grin, just the pale silence of someone who knew the show was slipping out of his control and had no idea how to get it back. Marisol was behind the counter, her hands steady as she poured another cup of coffee. She glanced up just once, acknowledging his presence not with fear, but with indifference, then calmly returned to her task. Victor stormed forward, his hands clenched rigidly at his sides. "You think this is over?" he barked, his voice grating against the low hum of the diner. Heads turned, but no one intervened. In the corner booth, Jonas McBride sat, coffee half drained, gaze locked onto the unfolding confrontation. He didn't rise. He didn't flinch. He simply watched. Victor leaned over the counter, his voice laced with fury. "You humiliated me." Marisol didn't blink. Her voice was cool, effortless. You did that to yourself. You lied, he snarled. You're not even in the system. I checked. There's no Rivera on any Echo roster. You made it all up. Looking for this? Came a voice from behind him. Victor twisted around. A man by the front window stood, slowly parting his faded jacket to reveal a weathered military patch. Red Viper coiled around a combat blade, dulled with time, but unmistakable in meaning. Name's Mason Carryle, the man said evenly. You told people I didn't exist. I'm here to say you're full of it. Another voice rose, clear and measured, from a nearby table. Lieutenant Ana Rios, 2 tours, Echo Viper, Kandahar. One by one they stood, men and women who had long disappeared into silence and denial. Not shouting, not angry, just present, like ghosts reclaiming the rooms they once walked. Victor stumbled back a step, rattled but defiant. You think this proves something? He snapped. Just a bunch of broken has-beens in a diner. Jonas rose then, not with force or rage, but with quiet finality. No, he said, his voice steady. What proves something is that you walked in here thinking this was still your stage. And now you're standing in a room full of people who stopped playing your game. Victor turned, scanning the faces watching him, some with cameras lifted, others simply bearing witness. The same tools he'd once wielded to humiliate and distort were now trained on him. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Marisol didn't move. She calmly topped off a customer's mug and, without looking at Victor, said with soft finality, "Go finish being irrelevant somewhere else." He stared at her, long, searching, desperate for some last shred of dominance. Then he turned and walked out into the daylight, alone. No cheers followed, no applause, just a silence that rang louder than any headline ever had. A man near the door gave a slow, solemn nod. Took long enough, he whispered. The video went viral before Victor even reached his car. A customer near the window had captured every second, the confrontation, the quiet strength, Marisol's measured takedown. No shouting, no drama, just truth, unfiltered, in a diner lit by morning light. By that evening, it had racked up over 4 million views. News sites exploded with headlines. Veteran waitress silences. Defense consultant in viral showdown. Real Echo Viper survivors emerge after government denial. Within 24 hours, Grange and Halt Consulting lost 5 federal contracts. By day 3, they released a generic press statement citing irreparable reputational harm. And by the end of the week, their board had dissolved entirely. Victor vanished from the media landscape. No interviews, no tweets, no denials. Just the same cold silence he had once used to erase others, now turned inward, consuming him. He was unmade by the same vacuum he had weaponized. And into that silence, a new voice rose. Marisol was invited to speak at the Veterans Advocacy Summit in Charleston. At first, she was a guest. Then, after the board reviewed her story, she was asked to deliver the keynote. She almost didn't go. Until Jonas showed up on her doorstep that morning, a suit jacket pressed in one hand, a summit badge in the other. Her name printed cleanly on it. Marisol Rivera, Echo Viper 9. You earned this, he said. Even if they forgot, you didn't. The auditorium was packed. Dress uniforms of every color lined the seats, medals gleaming, postures rigid with attention. Marisol stepped behind the podium, small in stature but impossible to ignore. Her scars were visible. Her hair was pulled back tight. She didn't hold a script. She didn't need one. I didn't come here to speak for Echo Viper, she began, voice calming, clear. I came here because for too long, people like us were told our silence kept the country safe, but silence didn't keep us alive. We did that. The room didn't erupt. It stood. In a rising tide of quiet respect, thousands of veterans stood, some with tears glistening, others with jaws clenched against long-buried truths. Jonas watched from the back, awe in his eyes, the kind he'd once reserved for battlefield miracles. As Marisol stepped down, her badge still clipped to her collar, someone stopped her and asked, "What happens next?" She didn't hesitate. "We find the ones still hidden, and we bring them home." 6 months passed, the storm faded, but its echoes lingered. At Rosie's Diner, a handwritten sign was taped to the window. Closed Sundays. Out fighting ghosts. No one questioned it. Everyone understood. Marisol no longer wore the apron. She still dropped in some mornings, helped Miguel prep the kitchen, brewed the coffee strong. But her life had outgrown chip booths and laminated menus. After Charleston, she received dozens of requests, panels, outreach programs, government inquiries asking her to consult. She declined most. But one letter, no return address, caught her attention. It came from Fort Reading Command Base, signed by a general whose name she'd only heard whispered in the classified shadows. The note inside read, "Echo Viper deserves its name back." 2 weeks later, Marisol stood beside Jonas on a wind-whipped runway at Fort Reading. The years had stiffened their joints, grayed their hair. But when the officers escorted them to the repurposed facility, now redesigned as a reconnaissance and intel center for veterans, they knew exactly what it was, a resurrection. Unofficially, they called it Project Viper. Jonas took lead on security. Marisol ran the intel screening, scanning names of missing operatives, tracking those who'd been scrubbed from history. They didn't advertise, they didn't speak to press, they just worked. One day, Delilah Knox arrived. She didn't bring a mic or a camera. She brought bronze, a memorial wall. Real metal, mounted with care, etched with every name from Echo Viper 9. Some had no grave. Some had been dismissed as training casualties. But now they had permanence. Above the names was a single line, in memory of those erased to protect the mission and those who returned to finish it. Marisol stood before the wall, her fingers brushing over one name in particular, Avery, her younger brother, her anchor. For the first time, she wept. Not for his death, but because, at last, he was no longer invisible. By spring, Project Viper had become something larger than any press release. It spread in whispers, across old message boards, encrypted chats, nods passed between veterans who hadn't worn a uniform in decades but still carried war in their blood. And one by one, they began to arrive, limping, scarred, paper trails scrubbed clean. But they were real, and they weren't done yet. She never demanded proof, not once. Many of them couldn't even form full sentences anymore. Men shattered in spirit, carrying only yellowed photographs, dented dog tags, or scraps of unit patches that no official archive acknowledged. They came to her in whispers, in fragments, and Marisol met each one with steady eyes and a single question. What did they take from you? Then, after a long pause, always the next, do you want it back? Jonas worked behind the scenes, his fingers tracing through shadowy records and cross-referencing redacted missions with code names long buried. He pieced together their hidden history, name by name, file by file. Delilah Knox, ever cautious, released the truth into the world in quiet doses. She published not for shock, but for salvation. Each name a piece of dignity restored. No headlines, no flash, just clarity, just justice. One afternoon, a young man showed up at the outer gate of Fort Reading. He was barely more than a boy, still green in reserve training, Noah Reyes, 24, nervous and out of place. In his hands, he carried a classified folder he had no right to possess. What brought him there wasn't the paperwork. It was a story. He said he'd once been pinned down during an ambush overseas, staring death in the face, when a woman with a medic's grip and impossible speed dragged him from the chaos. She vanished just as quickly as she'd appeared. No name, no record. The only thing he remembered was a flash of ink on her arm, EVS carved into her skin. Noah held out a sketch. It was drawn in pencil, rough and uneven, but unmistakable. Jonas studied it, then without a word passed it to Marisol. She didn't speak either, just stared at the lines for what felt like an eternity, the stillness in her expression saying everything. Then the corner of her mouth curved, a small, knowing smile. She's still out there, she murmured. Noah blinked, startled. You know her? Marisol folded the sketch, gently as if it were something sacred. I trained her, she said, voice low but certain, and you just confirmed she's alive. That night, she stood again on the roof of the base beneath the same stars that had once watched over their silence. But the silence wasn't the same anymore. Where there used to be nothing but shadows and lost voices, there were now signals, echoes carried forward. She no longer hid her scars. Others bore theirs now, openly, without shame. Jonas appeared beside her, holding 2 mugs of bitter black coffee. He handed her one and said, "We might be onto something here." Marisol nodded slowly. "We're building what they tried so hard to erase." Jonas raised his cup, a quiet, reverent toast, to the ones who wouldn't stay buried. Marisol touched her mug to his and whispered, "To the ones who came looking." The sun had already begun its descent over Fort Reading, casting long golden beams across the courtyard's cement and gravel. It was just after 1700 hours. Most of the base had settled into its evening rhythm. The breeze carried a soft, rhythmic clinking, the hollow sound of flag ropes tapping against weathered metal poles. Near the western edge, beside the old chapel where the new pavement met the gravel of an older time, stood the bronze honor wall. It was always quiet there. A single man approached it. His steps were slow, labored. His shoulders sagged under the weight of years and ghosts. One hand trembled slightly as it clutched a cane, hand-carved, worn smooth, with initials etched into its wood, a silent tribute to a comrade long gone. His jacket was plain. No medals, no flash, just one nearly colorless patch clinging to the fabric, so faded it could have been anything. But his eyes were sharp as ever. He stood before the wall and scanned its names, whispering each one under his breath like a prayer, like a litany from a time the world had tried to forget. Then he stopped. His fingers rose, hesitant, reverent, and touched one name, Rivera, Marisol, A09, 9 times. He said nothing. He didn't need to. His hand rested on her name, trembling not from age but from the weight of what that name carried, what it had cost, and what it had meant. There was no audience behind him, no press, no ceremony. Just the rustle of flags in the wind and the distant murmur of an old hymn floating out from the chapel speakers. And in that quiet, the past didn't scream. It didn't protest, it simply folded itself into the present. Finally, unmistakably, remembered. Not erased, not rewritten, just seen. From across the courtyard, Marisol stood beside Jonas. She didn't wave, she didn't cry. She just nodded once, solemn and steady, then turned away. Some stories don't need retelling. They only need to be seen. And now, finally, they were. Maybe that's all she ever wanted. Not medals, not applause, just a name etched in bronze, seen by someone who remembers. Because when the world forgets its warriors, they don't vanish. They wait, quietly, stubbornly, until someone like her brings them back into the light.